Meanwhile, protests against coronavirus restrictions and the government itself erupted in small pockets of all sizes across the nation this weekend, and in direct confrontation to new legislation passed by the Knesset. Nittany Manson reports.
I'm here in a limited demonstration because we have one huge dictatorship. We have a Caesar who sees the flames of Israel and he doesn't care about anything. He doesn't care about more than 1 million people who are unemployment according to his behavior. He destroyed almost everything of our democracy, of our society. Because of him we are crying every night, and I'm here for my children and for my grandchildren, so help me God.
Tens of thousands of Israelis came out to protest this weekend, in spite of, and in some cases because of, the newly passed bill banning large demonstrations amidst the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. The controversial new law stating that travel beyond 1 kilometer from home and crowding beyond 20 people would no longer be tolerated for the purposes of protest. Tourism Minister Asaf Zamir of the Blue and White Party, meanwhile, announcing his resignation from government in protest against the new law and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. A challenge to be overcome, though, the months-long anti-government Black Flag demonstrations, simply now divided into smaller groups in response to this new bill, with some simply ignoring the new law altogether. And clashes between police and demonstrators ending with at least 38 arrested. But demonstrators are alleging police use of excessive force, with footage apparently proving their point. And Yesh Atid Knesset member Ofer Shela is now calling for a Knesset committee investigation into police conduct at the first opportunity.
And now with more on the enforcement of these ongoing closures, we're joined by Israeli police spokesperson, Superintendent Mickey Rosenfeld. Mickey, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Now, I want to start with the protests. How would you rate the police-protester interactions over the weekend?
Well, in general, the Israeli National Police were on scene in more than 60 different protests that took place across Tel Aviv. A lot of police activities were taking place also on the ground in order to take control of the situation and, number one, allow the protests to take place, but at the same time, police had to respond to incidents that took place when roads were blocked. And unfortunately, there were protesters that even attacked our police officers at the scene. There was a quick response, a rapid response, and we confirmed more than 38 people that were arrested. A lot of police preparations taking place also for future activities on the ground.
Well, so how do you respond to the numerous allegations of excessive force?
There was no excessive force used by our officers. The situation on the ground is that lots of people gathered at different points in different areas. Our units were on the ground patrolling in order to make sure that social distancing was being kept. Our officers as well gave out fines to people that were not wearing masks, but unfortunately, time and time again, the roads were blocked by individuals who blocked the area, and it was therefore necessary to make arrests at the scene in order to open up the roads across the Tel Aviv area. Also in Jerusalem, there were disturbances that also took place that we had to deal with. But in general, there were thousands of people. The majority of them kept laws and regulations, but where they were not kept, our units responded immediately and relatively swiftly, making arrests.
All right, now, a big issue is the controversial Knesset law, which was just passed last week, banning large protests with the exception of the one in Jerusalem of groups above 20 people. You know, and there have been a lot of discussions and arguments about the legality or the violation of human rights with respect to that law. At what point can an officer say, you know what, I'm not going to comply with this order, I'm not going to enforce this law, or I'm not going to do whatever I've been told to do? Is that allowed? Is that something that ever happens?
That doesn't take place within the Israeli National Police. Every officer has to implement the new rules and regulations of the Israeli government. Of course, those specific changes are happening all the time. Recently, over the last week, for example, people could walk around within 1 kilometer. As of now, only someone can come and demonstrate if they're within 1 kilometer of, for example, Jerusalem and the Balfour area. And that is perfectly acceptable. And our units are there in order to make sure that those that are taking part in the protests are safe, and we ensure their safety. But at the same time, any officer, of course, that sees something that takes place against the law is allowed to implement those rules and must implement those rules.
All right, now what are the plans for the coming week and weekend? What lessons have you learned from this past week's Sukkot closure for the next?
Well, I think the most important issue for the Israeli National Police is keeping public safety and health measures at all times in all areas across the country. That is what we're dealing with at the moment in order to get the numbers of COVID-19 down. Let's not forget that the numbers are incredibly high. It's a joint effort by the public, by the Israeli National Police. Of course, people want to come and protest. That's perfectly acceptable. Our main efforts are roadblocks that have been set up across the country. Our police units patrolling on foot in the different areas to see exactly where people are, how they've arrived in their areas, and what for. When people need to go to hospitals and necessities, they are doing so, and we're making sure that we're allowing that to take place. But our main efforts over the next few days during Sukkot and the festival is inside the ultra-religious Jewish communities, preventing mass gatherings and the spread of COVID-19, as well as in the Israeli Arab neighborhoods to continue patrolling and prevent people from getting together.
All right, Mickey Rosenfeld, happy holidays, and thank you so much for being with us.